Okay, I just started the recording. All right, so this is what we're going to be going over today in the second session. First thing we'll do is go over the homework, and we'll finish up module 2. We had one little thing to do to finish up the module we started last Friday. Then we're going to go on to module 3, which is skills in emotional intelligence, and module 4, which is verbal communication skills. So let's go ahead and start talking about homework. So this was your homework. Okay, Sheila, I got you. This was your homework. Uh, there's on page 11 and 12 of your student manual. There were two activities, one for the disc and one for the values. And the activities were designed for you to go into your profile and examine your strengths and blind spots as it relates to your unique results, and then relate those relate those. Hang on, I gotta mute somebody. Ah, gotcha. And then relate those to what you do at work, and relate them to your success. And so the questions revolved around, what are your strengths and how do they enable your success? And what are your blind spots and how do they limit your success? So tell me, let me, do, 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 do. So let me ask you, having gone through the homework, and was this something that was difficult
For the most part, no.
for the most part?
Yeah. It, it was, uh, I was going to say, in both cases, strengths and weaknesses, they, I was able to come up with a handful of both without too much difficulty.
Hmm.
So that's what I'm saying. For the most part, it wasn't too difficult. And then to think about uh, how the strengths helped and the weaknesses could be potential limitations again, you know, kind of things came to mind fairly quickly.
Yeah. Tell me, as you were going through this, relating to your blind spots, did any of you come up with something that you do at work that was sort of a clash with your blind spots? In other words, this is a blind spot for me, but I'm still responsible for doing it at work. Did anyone have that happen to them? Nobody had it happen to them. Wow, that's great.
No, I was not surprised, but I tend to prefer a more controlled, deliberate, predictable environment. And I don't think I specifically work in a predictable environment all the time.
Yeah,
So that's a
yeah.
little bit of a clash for me. And controlled, and you know, yeah. So that was interesting to see that.
So first tell me, do you agree with that? Do you really like to have a more controlled, predictable environment?
I have really never had that in my entire. I worked in IT for 20 years. There's no predictability with that.
Yeah,
So I was surprised by that. That I was, yes, I am. I
yeah.
like to
So
really
is that a source of stress?
it can, yeah, apparently it can be. If it's out of control, yes.
Once I coached somebody who was an emergency room nurse, and she also had, as uh, part of her personality assessment, the need to be in a more predictable, controlled environment. And the emergency room is not a predictable, controlled environment at all. You get new stuff being thrown at you all the time. And it got to the point where she had been a nurse for a number of years, but never in an emergency room setting. So it got to the point where she just admitted, I can't take this. I have to get out. I have to get out of this altogether. As a matter of fact, being in the emergency room, excuse me, really soured on uh, her being a nurse at all. She didn't want to. She wanted to get out of nursing altogether,
Yeah,
just because of being in that fast-paced, dynamic environment.
I can see that. It was surprising because I actually really like things being unpredictable. Um, I
Hmm.
guess I have my limits, I suppose.
So, in going through this, did anybody have any new insights about your strengths and blind spots? Did you see anything in there that really surprises you that you hadn't thought of as a strength before? Anyone?
Yeah, I think I've become more predictable, and that amazes me because
Yeah.
before I didn't work in a controlled environment, and now I'm working in a controlled environment.
Hmm.
So I seem to be more predictable now, and I don't like that.
Oh.
I like more thinking outside the box than in the box.
Hmm. So, what is it about your role that is so predictable right now?
Probably the procedures, and I think it has to do with COVID
Hmm.
because everybody's looking for direction. And I think I got stuck in the same idea that we had to follow the procedure we were following before, but we're unable to do that because we're working at home
Yeah.
and we're contacting the customers online, doing online programs or by telephone, not in person. So
Uh-huh.
I had to reshift my thinking to become, I guess, not as predictable and how do I work my way around getting what I need to report to Maryland Department of Labor.
Okay. What else? Did anyone else have an insight?
Yeah, mine uh said kind of said that I don't like maybe rocking the boat, but
Yeah.
but really I don't mind rocking the boat. I'll try I'll try anything. Some and maybe deep down inside I don't like rocking the boat, but to get the job done, as the saying goes,
Yeah.
the woman got to do what she got to do.
Uh-huh. So, how can you apply these new insights that you've had to your work and life situations? I've had people tell me that based on what they read in their report, they now know that they're in the wrong job altogether and they need a totally different career.
Mine, mine state that I'm in the right job, the right place, the right time, and to do what's best for my personality, my work
Hmm.
style, my work ethics. And so I've taken this disc through another lady through another program.
Yeah.
Not this, it doesn't look the same, but it's basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
I'm pretty close. I'm really close to who I am.
Yeah. I mean, as from my perspective, having talked to people who feel like they're, in a real good alignment with who they are as a person and the things that they need to do in their job. Uh, what you can reasonably expect is like maybe about 80%. About 80% of the things that you have to do in your job can reasonably be expected to align with your strengths. And most people occasionally need to step into one of their blind spot areas uh, and do something. But as long as that isn't something that you have to do every day, it's a lot easier to manage the stress and discomfort that comes from that. But then again, I've had people who have to be in their blind spot zone every day, over and over and over and over again. And that's what becomes a big source of stress and also results in um, the emotional reactions.
And I also, found out that I need to work on softening my approach because, in my job, I'm performance driven as
Yeah.
well as, customer driven.
Hmm.
But I kind of need to, and I can see that I need to soften my approach sometimes when, things are due or information or report. When they're due, they do because when the ones that ask you for the reports are the ones that, paying you, you do what they
Hmm.
ask you to do. But I did find out, not didn't find out, I know that I'm a giver, and it says that I need to slow down on my giving because I'll give it away. I'll give everything away. I'm just, and so I need to work on work on that part. Doesn't matter. There's no limit. I'll just give until. So I really need to slow down on that. So
Hmm.
it was good for me to read.
Sometimes people who are real givers, who put others' needs ahead of their own over and over and over again, need to make a concentrated effort to take time for themselves. Make sure that you've got uh, that you make sure that you're taking care of your needs. Make sure that you're taking time off, taking time to do things that you like. Just making a conscious effort to block time to do that. Uh, Otherwise, it can be a huge source of stress over time. All right, so let's go ahead and start talking about the last piece that we didn't cover in our last section, which is empathy. Can somebody give me a good definition of empathy? What you think empathy means? What does it mean to you?
Isn't empathy being able to put yourself in well, shoes, being empathetic, well, sympathetic toward a person, kind of feeling, all about feelings.
Yeah, it is. It is about feeling. It's about being able to put yourself in other people's shoes. It's it's sort of like you sort of share the feelings of others by understanding where they are and understanding their emotions and then being able to connect with them on that basis. Um, I was recently at a funeral um, for a family member, and the of course emotions were running really high there, and it because of my empathy, I tended to feel what everybody else was feeling, and just that feeling, being around them, made me extremely sad. and emotional. But when I was by myself, I didn't feel that way. When I was off by myself, I didn't feel that way. It was sort of the collective emotional reaction of everybody who was there sharing the experience that was having an impact on me. Another way to think about it is ha is having an effective response to another's situation and putting yourself in their mental shoes. Um, the thing about empathy is it's not easy. It's not always easy, especially based on your personality. For some people, empathy comes a lot easier than for others. And people aren't always forthcoming with their problems, even though it's obvious there's something wrong. So you might need to ask questions, learn to ask questions. You read between the lines and read body language in order to effectively understand what the other person is going through. So let me get out of this because I don't have the different responses. I'm going to pull up the student handbook. All right. So this is an activity that is in your handbook on page 20 called Empathy is Key. So each one of these statements has a series of responses, and it's up to you to tell the rest of us, which do you think is the most empathetic response? So the first one here is, I can't believe Mr. Smith is making me work third shift. He knows I have children. So what do you think is the most empathetic response to this out of those three? You can put it in the chat box.
Um, I take these.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So these tend to answer themselves when you go through. We're getting B's, 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 B's. So what is it about B that shows empathy?
Because you're saying you understand, first of all,
Hmm.
that's the main thing, that you understand why you would be upset. So you kind of taking on their feeling, but then you actually um, go in and then say why. So you know the empathy part came at the first sentence.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you're also acknowledging the fact about that you understand why they would be upset.
Hmm.
So you're recognizing that they're a bit upset about the situation.
Yeah. So what take a look at response C there. Um, I think that's an interesting response. I look at I look at answer C as sort of the opposite of empathy.
Yeah, it's like, well, geez, I'd be happy if I got third shift.
Yeah, it's when you say that you're putting yourself in their shoes, this person is firmly in their own shoes.
Right. They're
You know, the
discarding.
person who would say response C is firmly in their own shoes because they're looking at the situation strictly from their perspective, and they can't understand why somebody wouldn't want to have that third shift pay. What about the second one? I have too much work on my plate.
So they don't have
I would
time.
say
They don't have time to deal with them.
Which response under number for statement number two
A.
would show empathy? We've got an A there. Yeah, I mean, the first part of that statement is purely connecting with them. What about the third one? I am so upset. I thought I was going to get the job promotion. If somebody says B, we're going to have a talk.
That was funny.
See,
Yeah, C, you're connecting with them and you're offering encouragement. Number 4, the regional meeting ran over time. Now I will be late for my team meeting.
yeah, see,
We got a couple, yeah, everybody's see how easy this is. See how everybody hits the right answer every time. It's B. And then finally, I am unable to meet my quota this month.
In each one of
This
these,
is this one here is kind of unique because it sounds like that C answer sounds like it might be a manager talking to their somebody on their staff. So this places you more in a leadership role. Um, are you any of you in a position where you're called upon to coach people who work for you on performance-related issues?
well, I think that if you are in leadership, you are a supervisor, you do that every day.
Hmm.
You know, that's just a given. You coach your staff to make sure that the common goal is accomplished.
Hmm. So, talking about emotional intelligence in general, do you find that emotional intelligence skills, how do they enable you to be a better leader when you're coaching?
Well, because you have to remember back when you started and when you
Hmm.
didn't know anything, somebody had to coach you, and so you're empathetic um, with your staff. You put yourself in their shoes and then explain. That's that's what I think.
This is something that also gets to your personality because there are some people who will approach leadership more like a coach. And then there are some people who will approach it more like an administrator or um, a how do I don't know what you call them. There are some people who will say, okay, I want you to do A, B, C, D, E, and F, and not expect you to stray from that, and sort of lay out everything, lay out uh, a total path, a total process. And then there are some people who say, well, this is what I want. Why don't you come up with a good way of doing it, and then we'll work together. And what I find is um, the coaching aspect of being a leader sometimes will not. It goes beyond not being natural to the leader. It can go into uh, why do I need to be a coach? Why I have certain expectations of my employees and I expect them to meet those expectations. And if they don't, then you get a response like A or B. You didn't meet your quota. Maybe you're not up to the task, so somebody else should do the job rather than trying to coach you up.
Right.
Have you ever encountered leaders who take on that attitude?
Sometimes,
Hmm, I've had those before. They're no fun to work for.
Sandy, in talking about empathy, which I think is a great thing, I've also learned about that you need to be real cautious
Hmm.
uh, in doing it. And the main thing I think about is when people say, I know what you're going through. Uh, a lot of people get real upset when somebody tells them that because chances are excellent we don't know what they're going through. We've never experienced it. And so to me, this is an area that I've learned you need to be careful with because we could put ourselves, say, if you will, in another person's shoes. But unless we've truly experienced what they're struggling with, we really can't say to them, I know what you're going through. I think that can cause more issues than solve problems.
So is there a better way that you've discovered uh, to navigate that situation than just saying, I know what you're going through?
To say, I believe I understand your situation and why you're feeling that way. Don't talk about them and their feelings, if you will, but not say I've gone. Don't make them think that you're saying, "Hey, I've gone through the same thing,"
Hmm.
unless you could really maybe give them an example or something that helps them to understand.
Hmm. So Tandi just made a comment that was that sort of teared off of what I was thinking. Tell me about it. Ask them to tell you about it, or let them talk.
Mhm.
So now you're giving them an opportunity to sort of inform you. If you're not if you haven't experienced what they're experienced, ask them questions. Let them tell you what it's like so that you can get a better idea. And then at some, at some point, you may be able to connect with them better and identify with their situation better. We're going to be talking a whole lot about making those connections through asking questions here later in the workshop today. So thank you, Joe. That's a great insight. So let's move on now to module 3, which is skills in emotional intelligence. So the way you start um, developing skills uh, is to focus internally by understanding your own emotions and their meanings. And when you get this understanding, you can start to discover productive ways to manage your own emotions and then use them to benefit yourself and others. So it's important to learn how to first accurately perceive emotions. And here are some things that you can understand and apply in your interactions with others about perceiving emotions. Generally, words are half the message. Um, I always say that when it's time to communicate something important, something critical, something crucial, being in person is essential. Um, the best situation is being in person so that you can understand the full scope of the communication because words are half the message. What they say, how they say it, what is their body language as they're saying it. This is why I believe that email is the worst form of communication ever devised by humans. Um, Trying to communicate something critically or crucially in an email is never effective. I've seen more problems result due to trying to convey things emotionally in emails um, than anything. You really have to be in person when you're having a crucial conversation like that. And uh, it's also extremely important to focus on the message at hand and recognize that you are filtering it through your own emotions. Your own emotions are coloring. I just got a comment here from Louise. We are hearing some echo, so if you're if you're not talking, please mute. Um, that occurs when you're not muted. Sometimes my voice coming out of the speakers through the delay can sound like an echo. Thank you, Louise. Sorry about that. Um, so as I was saying, how you feel serves as a filter or a lens through which you view the situation at hand. Um, so the underlying reason for why you feel the way you do, it's very important for you to understand. It's very important for you to be aware of. So bringing a negative emotion into the interaction influences your reaction to that and colors and biases the way you think about it and the way you react to it. So understanding that it's not a good idea to have those negative emotions during that interaction, it's really important that you understand why you have those negative emotions. Why are you unhappy? So learn how to deal with those things, alter the thing that's making you unhappy, and consciously tell yourself that that thing is not worth allowing you to be upset. This will help you now sort of change your mood, help you choose to be in a good mood. And sometimes this is very difficult to do. I have a critical conversation that's coming up tomorrow with a group of people at a church that I'm working with in Ocean City. And they have been exhibiting some behavior that is running counter to what we said we were trying to accomplish. And I was working with them since last October on a very specific strategy, only to find in April that there was some of them were kind of working against me. At the same time, I had a group of them working forward. There was another group that was working against me. And as a result, the thing that we developed essentially just blew apart. So I'm having a conversation with them about that tomorrow. And I know that I'm going to be bringing some very negative emotions into that. Unless I can figure out a way to manage those, it will make our interaction less productive and less effective than it could be. So I am trying to tell myself that what happened uh, could be a blessing in disguise and work through that with them rather than coming in strong and leading with, punching them in the jaw over their behavior that led to this current situation that we're in. And let me tell you, it's not easy. I've got these feelings that I know I need to deal with, and it's not easy at all. So here's an activity on page 25 that's going to help us learn to deal with this. And again, this is something normally in a classroom environment that we would take some time to write down, but we can use the chat function here for you to let everyone know your thoughts on this situation. So the situation that you're being asked to react to is you were recently offered a prominent position with a reputable company. And this is the opportunity you've been waiting for in order to break into the industry of your dreams. The only drawback is you have to move 600 miles away from where you currently live. So you're going to be moving away from your family and your friends and everything that you know. But you decide this new job is worth the move and decide to accept it. But once you get to the company, you realize the position is not at all what you were told it would be. So, what is your initial reaction to this?
I just experienced this with somebody that took a job because they promised them that they had enough staff. They were trained, and when she got there, it wasn't anywhere or any way like they explained it. So she's mad. So she wants to quit. And so you know, I don't think I was empathetic in that way. I'm saying you weren't working, at least you have a job. How would you answer that?
That's so this was a client of yours?
No, it's a person. Everybody calls me retention. These are retention people that I used to have maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and then they call me
Okay.
back and they call me and let me know this stuff.
Oh. So in your position, your first reaction was the at least you've got a job reaction?
I said, and work the job until you can find something else that you like. But you made a commitment to these people. But I think part of it is that this person is making lots of money, so they kind of torn um, between being angry because it wasn't what they were told the job was going to be, and then on the other side, they're making money now they can pay their bills.
Right.
I think one of the first things I would do is to try and take a step back and look at the situation and see if it really was that it wasn't what I was told it would be, or, is that what the people who spoke to me, did they really say this? Or did I, was I perceiving the job was, was different? Like what, was I taking this information and interpreting it in a way to suit me and that looking objectively, I really wasn't being told this stuff at all, because I mean, yeah, you could say I'll get angry and I could lash out at the people that I'm now working for, but I think I would try and be objective to see if it was something that's more on me or if they really did misrepresent it, if you
Hmm.
can understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. You have it could be your interpretation
Right.
of what they said to you that was wrong, and maybe it's some things that you didn't take the time to get clear before accepting the job. Um, I'm I'm surprised this doesn't happen more often because I don't know with the people who you coach, um, it, your clients who are going into job interviews and whatever. I don't know how often people will interview the employer, ask questions of the employer to make sure that the situation is something that they, you know, um, like what's a good example of this? There's a sheet in your Disc Plus report in the Disc section on your ideal job climate. And that's a really good source of questions for people to ask during a job interview to make sure that you're going into the job climate that is going to be the most beneficial for you. And a lot of times people don't take the time to ask those kind of questions. So they get into the situation and find, hey, this isn't what I expected. Um, so there are lots of different approaches. There's the, can I prevent this from even happening through the interview process? Or is it just that this job is so important to me that I need to take it regardless and just hope for the best?
Sandy, can I make a comment on that as well?
Sure.
In a lot of cases, even just from personal experience and a lot of our clients that we deal with, I always tell our people that there's a process when you come into a new situation or if you come into a new job, you have to give yourself that space and time to really get used to being in that environment, working that new role. Um, so there's that it's that space and time that you have to give yourself or the client, um, that time to really get used to being in that place. So in other words, you don't want to make a hasty or wrong decision just because you're in a situation and it feels uncomfortable at that point in time. So that's kind of some of my best practices, personally and sometimes dealing with our clients. You want to give yourself some time to even get used to being in a new environment. So if you walked into a new role and that supervisor or manager said you would be doing X, Y, and Z,
Hmm.
again, you have to give yourself some time to really um, fill in the space. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Can anyone else identify with what Ron's talking about here?
I can. Like my current job, it took me quite a while to get acclimated to working in an office environment, to understanding the way we process things, because I've worked in retail over 20 years. Um, the dynamics were a lot different. And it floored, it really did take me a while to get used to it, being connected to people in a different way and working together. I honestly, less teamwork than what I was used to. I was high teamwork atmosphere, but I totally understand that. I do have a problem though when employers, and this is with previous employers, where they kind of gloss over difficult situations that their employees might be encountering, and then they walk into the job and they're really not prepared for things. I used to, when I was like a trainer at one of my jobs for a long time. If people needed to be trained in in an area, they would move me there, and I would help train them
Hmm.
on the process and how to do certain things with the computers. And often the HR would mislead the people when they were just their first job. These summer hirings, they would imply that the chance they'll get hired. Well, you only have a 5% chance of being hired, and you're telling 100% of the people that they're going to get hired, and then putting them in areas they're not good at. They could have been moved to a different area in the same company and been quite proficient at it.
Hmm.
I don't understand why some employers do that.
Desperate people do desperate things. And so that, but on the other side of it, I did tell them that the reason why you were hired, because they checked you out, you're excellent, management, you will be able to bring the people up and train them. And so they wouldn't have hired you if they didn't need you. They need your expertise. They need your experience. Things like that, I thought it felt like I was just glossing over it, because I'm trying to encourage her to stay at this company that actually lied and
Mhm.
said, you know, one thing and was really something else.
Okay, well, thank you. Go ahead.
No, that makes sense. That's a good way of wording it to people.
So what we're moving into now is, skills to help you manage your emotions. So managing your emotions, it's a very conscious and active task. Being aware of your emotional state at any given time enables you to now come up with better strategies for managing yourself, managing your emotions. And one of the things we talked about last time was being able to anticipate the situations that tend to cause negative emotional reactions. One of the things that I learned about myself early on was that uh, I guess you might call it a lack of flexibility on my part, but it's sort of a conditional lack of flexibility that gets me into trouble. So, um, in other words, I am extremely flexible when we're at the beginning and we're getting information and we're learning about the situation and we're exploring a problem and coming up with alternatives and ideas. And I like for that to be a very exploratory process. And um, that's where my flexibility is at its maximum. But once we've determined on a path forward, that's where I expect now that our energies are going to be applied on the things that we decided we needed to do. And I realized about myself early on that when people uh, will say, "Oh, well, I never agreed with that, uh, with what we worked out. I'm not going to support it. I'm going to go in another direction." Those type of things really, really evoke a negative reaction in me. I would have people who I worked for who would do that, who would actually assign me to do something and then never be fully on board with what I was doing and then just sort of brush it off later on. And I would have difficult relationships with my bosses because of that. So I had to learn, because these were the things that triggered negative emotions in me, that I had to sort of prepare for them and do things. Here's one of the cool things that I started doing at the end of every meeting, because I knew that there are some people who, even if they disagreed with what the group said, would not relay that. So at the end of every meeting, I will now ask people, where are you on a scale of 1 to 7 on I don't think this is going to work, or I totally believe that we're on the right track, and I fully support this. And I will get them to actually weigh in so that I know, and I'm not going to be surprised anymore. So these are the type of strategies that I've had to develop to help utilize my emotions to accomplish a goal. Um, and it helps keep the group moving. It helps keep them on track. It also helps keep me from having negative emotional responses. Um, I've learned how to learn from my emotional reactions. So my emotions aren't the enemy. They do contain valuable information that, if used properly, can help me make sound decisions. So learning from what your emotions are telling you, learning about from those train wreck situations, and then giving these things, informing you and giving you enough uh, giving you adequate material from which you can now develop those approaches and strategies to help manage yourself and help create better, more beneficial outcomes. On page 28 and 29, how do you feel? So we're going to go through each one of these following scenarios, and I want you to express your first reaction and then come up with some alternatives based on, thinking about how you feel, why you feel that way, and then come up with a couple of alternatives to the way we would handle the situation. The first one, you find out that somebody has intentionally broken your car window. What's your first reaction?
If it
I'm
was
upset
intentional,
that it's deductible.
I'm sorry, what there was some crosstalk there.
sorry, you can go ahead.
I just get upset because I have to pay a deductible. I get upset, to be honest with you, because the window can be fixed, but that money coming out of my pocket, I have to work more for that. That would upset me.
If it was intentional, I want to know who it was. I want to know who that person was. If it was intentional.
I don't know
My,
why they did it, but I don't know if that makes a difference. They still did it, it's done.
I think I would feel violated because, we keep stuff in our car. They can go through your stuff and, I just feel violated.
I guess I'd like to know, I'd like to know why, they intentionally broke my car window. Now, it's possible that they intentionally broke it because they wanted to rob something to include the car. But, if I've already determined it was intentionally broken, yeah, I'm going to be a bit upset. And, one of the things I'm going to be, that's going to govern the situation is if I have a good feeling, if I know who it is or I don't, if I don't, I'm probably going to be, upset a lot because there's probably no way to find out who did that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, maybe as I start thinking a little more rationally, explore that and see, does it turn out that there's a camera that may have picked up the action that would identify who the person was?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I'd be thinking about, how can I calmly or reasonably calmly uh, address this person?
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd be thinking about the hassle, of getting it repaired and maybe be a bit of upset about that because it's only natural to think about, oh, geez, I gotta, go take care of this now.
How about the second one? Your biggest client has decided to take its business elsewhere. What's your first reaction to that?
Why? If I can
That's
find out from them why, why they decide to take the business elsewhere, that's going to be a learning or a teaching point for me. Is it something I could have done something about?
Yeah, this one is the one that um, I have to wonder. Do you have any indication that this is coming? Has your relationship been, uh, going downhill, or is this something that just appears out of the blue?
I think that, if I confront or if I discuss, I don't want to say confront, but that I discuss with the client and say, I'm sorry that you're taking your business elsewhere, but could you give me some reasons as to why this is happening? One of the things that you have to do is assess. I would have to assess, are they giving me an honest answer? Does it have the ring of truth to it? Or are they really coming up with something that I could tell they really don't want to tell me why they're going. You know, that's,
I think,
go ahead, Wanda.
I think many times you kind of already know if you have a really good relationship with your client or your client or your business, you probably had some warning signs already. So yes, you could ask all those questions as to why, but I think a lot of times we already know why. It's just hard for us to accept why.
Yeah, unless it's something that came out of the blue, you're going to
Yeah.
have a feeling, like Sandy mentioned. Is this something
Mhm.
that you could see have been coming on?
Mm-hmm. What about the third one there? A water main break is preventing you from getting into your home. What's your initial reaction?
Build a bridge. I'm sorry, I had to say it.
Nothing upsets you, Joe.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yep.
Call the city and give them help.
So, given that there's a water main break and you can't get into your home and they're working on it, but it's going to take time. What are some alternative ways of handling the situation?
Well, getting into your home might mean you can't drive your car there. And so, you could ask, could you walk, the rest of the way to get home?
Mhm.
Try to find some other, ways to get home.
Or go
So,
take a long drive somewhere, go to the park
Yanni says go shopping.
and go
That
shopping or
sounds real
restaurant.
good.
My big question is there someone in the home that needs to get out? I may not be able to get in, but I need to think about, is there anybody in there that that's trapped in the home that needs to get out for whatever reason? How am I going to do that?
And then the fourth one, your favorite TV show has been taken off the air. Oh,
That's just criminal.
that always happens to me.
Yeah,
Let me see if I can find it somewhere else.
Find another show.
that's right.
I hear stories about fans like making petitions when they find out that their show is being canceled. They write petitions and they try to convince the network to keep it on the air. And like 1 out of 10 times it works. The Waltons was like that. Waltons was a series from back when I was a kid. Uh, they were going to pull that off the air, and the fans got together and petitioned them, and they ended up going several more seasons. Star Trek originally was like that. After this, they were going to cancel it after the second season, but they got a third season due to fan petition. Ellen says, "I move on."
Honestly, I feel like they stole all my favorite TV shows. So
It's funny. I think that this question is almost being has almost been outdated, or it sounds quaint because you have so many options now with streaming and everything. It's hard for me to get fixated on a single TV show when you've got a million TV shows to choose from.
I I don't know. My daughter is 12, and we just found some TV shows that I think are okay for her to watch.
Hmm.
And like last night, we were all about I think it's called The Neighborhood, and Bob loved Abishola, and we sat down and got our popcorn, and we're like, okay, we're watching our shows because it's the end of the season, and we're gonna watch it for next year. But it's hard to find things that I think are appropriate for children that I will actually watch and
Actually, I think that they've got me hooked now on uh, the new way of delivering series content, where they'll come out and just give you 10 episodes all at once, and then you watch them all at once, and then you have to wait a whole year or two for the next ones to come. So they've got me hooked on that. As a matter of fact, the worst thing that could happen there is for them to decide, well, we're going to cancel the series after they've ended the 10 episodes on a cliffhanger.
Yeah, that's happened.
Yeah. All right, let's move on now. We're going to talk about communication skills, verbal communication skills for the remainder of the morning. And if you've been in any of our training before, communication skills has come up several times. Communication skills end up being a critical part of most of what we do. So there's always going to be a at least some communication skills training related to anything that we go into. Um, so we understand how important communication skills are. We are not born good communicators. It's things that we acquire. Communication skills, we acquire that over life. We learn how to communicate effectively. We learn how to communicate better. We learn the importance of listening and communicating. But there's a lot of factors that contribute, and we're going to go over a few of those right now. And the first thing I want to talk about is listening. In a workplace environment, lack of listening skills is one of the most important potential emotional triggers that you need to be aware of. There are some people who are natural listeners. There are some people for which listening becomes very difficult. And but having strong listening skills is essential. Um, Hearing something other than what is being said or trying to think of what to say while the speaker is talking can have dire consequences. So understanding what the individual is saying or trying to say or trying to convey or jumping right to the conclusion before you understand what the situation is always leads to bad consequences. Focused listening is a skill. You have to make a conscious effort to do it and be aware again of yourself. If you are multitasking, uh, if you are doing other things when you should be listening, developing these focused listening skills becomes extremely important. So this is not in your book, in your student manual. This is a variation on something that I like to do in all of my workshops related to listening and problem solving and things. And that is essentially becoming more aware of, of, of how to listen and what to listen for when somebody is relaying a problem to you. So I'd like to take a minute here, and I would like for somebody to think about a problem they're having right now, who would be willing to elaborate on that to the group for a few minutes. And as that person is talking, I want the rest of you to be listening. Listen to what they're saying, and then write down your impression of what the problem is based on their description. Okay? So who has a problem right now? It could be at home, it could be at work, And who's willing to state the problem and then elaborate on that for a few minutes? Folks, people have problems every day. I know somebody's got a problem out there they're working on right now.
Well, my manager is on, my two workers are on, so I will be silent.
I agree with you. That's part of my issue right now. I don't want to put some of this out there.
Okay, well,
Gee, Wanda.
Well, I don't want to say, I don't.
Oh, I understand. I, I'm thinking the same thing.
mhm.
um, Let me think of some outside problem.
If we have to, I'll come up with something. You want me to come up with something? I will.
Yes.
I don't have any trouble
Yes.
talking about my problems. So since I already brought it up, the client that my Ocean City client that I'm having trouble with. So let me tell you about, or let me restate what I told you before. They, um, they essentially said they want to accomplish one thing, but at the same time, they're working against me behind the scenes to try to prevent us from accomplishing that one thing. And instead, do something else. So how this manifests itself is when they all get together in a group, they all say, yeah, 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 we want to do this. But then when they go their separate ways, there is some shadow activity going on. And you find that there are people who, when they got together in the group, were either dishonest or they just didn't really say what they really felt. And as a result, they never supported the result that we achieved when we were in that group. Now, this has happened to me before, where people who you don't hear from when you're together in a group become the problem because you don't hear from them and you never knew that they disagreed. And as a result, they're perfectly fine with disagreeing, but not saying anything about it because they know that they can just go and try to change it, behind the scenes. And that's what's been happening with this group. So as a result, I thought from October to April that we were trying to achieve this goal, but find that there was a group of people that were behind the scenes doing what it took to eliminate that goal and achieve something totally differently. So as a result, they spent 6 months of my time and their money developing something that's going to be put on the shelf and never used. So that's my problem. So write down your impression of what I just said based on your listening to me and interpreting what I said. And then tell the group what you think. I don't hear you, Wanda.
You want us to say it now? Because I was writing them down as.
Sure, go ahead.
I felt your frustration.
Mhm.
Why weren't people being upfront? Um, you felt like you feel like you're not getting any support. and who is really influencing them, and do they really want help? And do they, and and then at the end, it felt like it was like you have so much to give, and if they don't want it, it's their loss because you're getting paid. That was my thought.
Okay, so yeah. So what you're doing is you're listening to what I'm saying and then you're processing it and you're giving your reaction to it.
Right,
Okay. You're not just throwing me back what I said, you're giving your interpretation and your reaction to what I said.
right,
You've sort of put yourself in my shoes and you said, hey, if this was happening to me, this is how I would feel.
hmm,
And what are some other reactions? Wasting resources, time and money.
I have one question, Sandy, that comes to mind that I would want to address, and that is,
Hang on to that, Joe, because we're going to go into question asking here in a minute.
oh, okay,
So yeah, I expect for you to have questions. I expect for everybody to have questions um, when you get to this point, when you hear what I had to say, because I haven't said everything. I expect you to have questions now. We're going to deal with those in a minute. So hang on to that.
will do.
So Sheila says, I'm feeling like people are not being forthcoming with their opinions and they're just telling you what you want to hear. One of the things that I've learned over time, going back to our DISC plus assessment, the people who are more extroverted can tend to dominate a meeting, and the people who are more introverted can tend to just sort of take everything in and might not let their opinion be known. So a lot of times it's the people who don't let their opinion be known who will now leave the meeting with now the task, okay, I've got to work against this to make sure this doesn't happen. This has to do with sort of the culture of the organization and the dynamics of the group, especially if these people have known each other for years and they've been working with each other for years. Let me see if somebody else, yeah. Tondi points out, yeah, they're wasting resources, time, and money. Yeah, this is my initial reaction. Why do you want to hire me to do this when you have no intention of following through on what you say you want? So yeah, whoops. How did I do that? So yeah, I think you guys did a good job there of listening to what I had to say and then reacting to it. Um, so now we can move on to the second part of this, which is asking questions. Um, Asking questions is the second part of the listening process because I, laid out my problem and you got from it everything just based on what I said. Um, you fashion your reaction to that. But what I haven't said yet is also extremely important. And in order to get to, the things that I didn't say, now you need to start asking questions. And there are different types of questions that you can ask, and we're going to learn a little bit about that. I sent you a handout for today's meeting on asking questions, and we're going to go into that here in a second. That will help you develop some go-to questions to help you in situations like this. So learning a series of probing questions to ask and then learning how to relate them to the topic at hand. This comes in, whoops, how did I do that? This comes in the handout that I sent you. The idea of there being 3 levels of inquiry. When I'm asking questions, I can ask questions for essentially at 3 levels. At the very top level, I just want to understand what's going on. This is called pure inquiry. So this is a reporter going to the scene and asking questions like who, what, why, where, how, things like that. So my goal is to understand everything that I can possibly understand. I want to get this person to fully disclose everything that's going on. Then the second level of inquiry is diagnostic inquiry. So now I'm going to start analyzing what you've told me by asking more probing questions. I'm going to try to dig deeper. It helps me to analyze what you're talking about, but at this point, I am not ready to give you ideas or suggestions or advice or opinions. I'm still digging in and trying to diagnose what I think the real root cause of the problem is. And once I've gotten to that point where I think I've reached the end of my diagnostic inquiry, then I can go into what's called confrontive inquiry. I'm now going to confront the problem with my understanding after going through the diagnosis. And I can now insert my own ideas. I can start asking, well, have you tried this? What do you think about this? And my goal in confrontive inquiry is to influence the customer. All right. So this is the handout that I sent you is a really good resource. And then you're going to have an opportunity in that handout to actually write down some types of questions. And for each one of these levels of inquiry, there are ideas. There's a list of generic questions that you can ask for pure inquiry, diagnostic inquiry, and confrontive inquiry. This is one of my, I guess you could call it pet peeves, as we relate to the process that I just laid out. Based on your own personality, you might gravitate towards one of those 3 levels. Okay. So, in other words, I might want to explore the problem. I want to be in the diagnostic phase. I want to get to that diagnostic phase and I want to live there, and just ask. There are some people who want to jump right to the third, to the confrontive inquiry, as soon as you're done talking about your problem without digging. So, do you feel that your personality drives you to or help or makes you tend to gravitate towards one of those 3 levels more than others? What do you think? What do you think that you like? What do you think that you prefer to go to?
This is Ellen. I usually probably am more of the pure inquiry to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that I have enough information
Mm-hmm.
to come up with a possible solution.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a high C.
Ah,
I'm a high I too, but
a lot of times I'll find that the higher C's will go to the second level, the diagnostic inquiry. Sometimes high I's will want to do that too. Any guess as to where high D's tend to gravitate towards?
It's no holding back. Uh, they're just going for it, ask questions, You know, sometimes don't think twice before they speak once. Being afraid.
I find that high Ds tend to jump to the third level as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Confrontive inquiry, because they want to remember high Ds are generally all about solving that problem quickly and getting it out of their way. So they want to arrive at that solution as quickly as possible. And a lot of times when I'm coaching an individual who's a high D, getting them to go through those first two steps becomes a real stressor because their behavior is driving them to get to that solution as quickly as possible. So they might tend to short circuit the first two steps. Whereas the low D has no problem with it at all. The low T tends to gravitate towards this naturally because they are more inquisitive and they want to learn about the problem. So they will ask you, the questions before they're comfortable giving you an opinion as to their, what they recommend. So your behaviors and your motivators do tend to influence how you approach this process. So this is again something for your self-awareness, something to add to your self-awareness. How does my communication style influence how I participate in the listening and communication process? So now I want you to go to the probing questions handout and come up with some ideas of questions to ask me about what I said, with the goal of restating what you really think the problem is that I'm facing, or problems that I'm facing, based on your new understanding. So you're trying to now go beyond just the surface and dig down a little more. So use that handout and look at that. As a matter of fact, let me pull that handout up. Oops. There we go. The probing questions handout. So the pure inquiry questions are here, just very generic. The diagnostic inquiry questions now help you explore a little deeper. And then here are the confrontive inquiry questions. So using these, come up with some questions to ask me about the situation that'll help give you more insight. How did the others feel or react to some of the members going in another direction? To be honest with you, by April, when I found out that the other direction was happening, uh, or after, I should say not by April, but after April, after I found that out, in the next week or so, I discovered that I might have been the only one who who understood of this competing direction. That there were others in the group that I was working with who always understood that this was going on, but they just didn't relay it to me. So I think the others were more accepting of this alternative direction than I was. Um, Wanda asks, are you really talking their language? I think I'm talking their language. I just don't understand their motivation. Sometimes I feel like it's like a person who's trying to lose weight who says, I need help. And they go find somebody to help them lose weight. And that person says, well, you need to start eating this and not eating that, and you got to start this type of exercise and blah, blah, blah. And then they say, no, I don't want to do that. I just want to lose the weight. I think that that's what I'm experiencing here with them a little bit, is that is what I'm finding out is that they say they want to achieve a certain goal, but they're really not willing to do what it takes to achieve that goal. One of the things that I believe that I understand about them now is how they deal with conflict if they disagree on something internally, because that's what we were working on. We were working on strategy to deal with this one issue that has been very divisive. It has sort of split the congregation. And at the initial meeting, they said, we want to come together over this. We want to figure out a path forward that we can all live with. I really think that some of them felt like, no, we don't. We just want to purge the folks who are on the opposite side of this issue than we are. Joe says, put on the shelf, never used, opinion or fact. I would say that it is an opinion based upon my experience that a lot of times when you develop a strategy, you you do it based on your best intentions and your vision at the time. But then when it comes to actually implementing it, it's where the people lose energy. And it's a lot better, it's a lot easier to say this is what we need to do to solve the problem than to actually do the things you need to do to solve the problem. And all of the change that adds to the system. So when you're working with an organization that's been there for a couple hundred years and they've gotten used to doing things a certain way, and the thing that you developed with them, when they understand how much they need to change to accomplish it, uh, a lot of times they're just not willing to do that change. That said, I believe that there is a path for me to help them take what they've developed and use it as a resource to help them on this path that they say they want to go on now. So 100% of it might not be put on the shelf. Maybe 60% of it will get put on the shelf, and we'll figure out a way to use 40% on it. What other questions? You've got that sheet there. You've got that handout that's got some ideas in there.
Are you talking to the right audience? Um, are these the people that are not going to change? Are they so old they won't change? Are you talking to some of the younger people that would have different ideas and different um, aspects on?
They have no younger people, and that's one of their main. That's the thing that they say. One of the main things they say they want to change. This is an older congregation that wants to say they want to attract young members, but let me to be a little more specific with you. Um, this whole thing revolves around a community center that they've been operating that reaches out to the young families and gives them an opportunity to bring their kids in and do like dance classes and arts and crafts and science and all sorts of things to attract the young families to them. And it's always divided the congregation because there are people who believe that this is just a money pit. And so we decided we were going to, make some changes to it so that financial issues were no longer a concern, that it was driving new members and attracting the right people and just all sorts of things that we were going to do. And they just decided to shut it down.
Did
So
they
the
go?
people who shut it down, uh, they won. So they're not bringing the congregation together, they're pushing away the people who don't agree. These are, so a couple of the questions that came from the chat here, are these elected people or elders? This is what I would consider the church leadership plus the people who wanted to get involved in moving forward. So I would say, because this is a small congregation right now, I'm working with the people who are more likely to be engaged and interested in the future of the church. Ellen asks, are they scared of change? I don't know if scared is the right word, but definitely there are things about change that they are not comfortable with. Saying, for instance, when I work with a church who says they want to attract young families, saying that you want to attract young families and then actually experiencing the impact that bringing in young families has to an older congregation is two different things. You're going to change, and you need to be comfortable with that change, with not knowing how you're going to change. How is this going to change the culture of our congregation? I believe there are those who just want to cater to retirees and say, we don't need young families. Ocean City is a retirement destination, so we just need to figure out how to attract people who are more our age. That's something that'll come out in tomorrow's conversation, I think. What alternatives do I see as being viable? Joe asks. I think that they could figure out how to use this community center in a way that accomplishes what they say they want, uh, but doesn't have the financial drain. For instance, one of the things they did when they started this was they bought a property, 10 acres with a building on it, about 8 miles away, through which they were offering these community activities. This is a vast untapped potential of of uh, of possibilities right now. So if they decide to keep that, even though they've stopped their programs, they can come up with now new strategies to leverage it in order to accomplish what they said they want. They could partner with a nonprofit. They could partner with all sorts of other organizations that might need that space to do things. And through these partnerships, expose more people to their congregation. So they do have alternatives. My challenge, I think, is to help them to see that they can't, though, keep, you know, sabotaging these paths going forward, and that I'm going to hold them accountable, more accountable now, to, getting behind something and coming together to make it happen, and that I'm not going to tolerate the the shadow leadership coming in and cutting our legs out from under us. So yeah, Joe, there are alternatives, I think. I don't think, and that's the only path forward is to recognize these alternatives. Any more questions? Oh, here's some. Sounds like money-driven issues. There are definitely people who are in charge of the finances who are only looking at this through a financial lens. Um, they say, hey, we don't want to pay for a director. Hey, this isn't giving us the benefit that we thought we were going to get. Um, so all they're not looking at it as an investment, they're looking at it as a cost. And they're the ones who initially said, we want to kill this, the financial folks. Can they compromise and share the space as a church community to achieve both sides? What I found is that they are unwilling. They said they were willing to compromise, and move forward, but the financial folks had a louder voice and decided that compromise was not the path forward, that eliminating the community center function was easier than compromising on it. Now, sharing the space with other organizations is definitely an alternative. It's definitely a possibility. And I think probably they will gravitate towards that more.
Sandy, have you tried to bring in the people to utilize that's going to use? Well, how some people want to utilize this building for the community. Have you thought about bringing in some young people to talk to the group and the kinds of things they would like to do, and then bring in maybe some of the other community partners that want to do something and have them talk to it to the group? And then it's not like you trying to force them. It's like these people are saying there's a need. We would like to use the church or the community center at the church to accomplish a need, to meet a need.
So there's about 3 or 4 things that you've touched upon there. So first I want to tell them, I want to make it clear that I'm not recommending that they do anything. I'm not trying to force them to do anything. I am trying to facilitate accomplishing what they said they wanted to accomplish. So, part of my role in doing that is to call out behavior that I think works against us, and that's what tomorrow's meeting is about. So there's that. The second thing, leading into this decision, they did, or we did, survey their existing clients. They have several hundred people coming into the dance classes and everything before COVID shut everything down, and let them weigh in on what they wanted. And so they told the church leadership, hey, we want you to reopen here in September so that we can start coming back. And about 95% of their clients said, we will come back and start going to those programs again. And then here are some new programs we'd like you to consider offering. So they knew that they had a client base to support what we said we wanted to accomplish. At the same time, they have heard from some other organizations who came in and said, we would like to lease this from you so that we can do our thing in the summer. We would like to use your building for this thing. And so now and that's another thing they didn't tell me. They didn't tell me that there were now competitors for using that building. So now they're weighing all of this and they're saying, well, one of these alternatives costs us a lot of money, but the other alternatives generates money. So which should we even be considering? Let's bring this to a close here. The last thing somebody said, do young people want this in their community? Yes, they support this extremely well. Their clients that they've developed over the years support this community center extremely well, especially as it relates to dance classes. And the reason they like it is because most of the formal dance classes in the area require a very high level of commitment, whereas I think the dance classes that they were offering are more transactional. They were a little less expensive, and they didn't require that level of commitment from the families. So they really liked having that alternative. Plus, as far as the arts and crafts and the science stuff, nobody else was doing that. So they, the young people and their families really wanted this. So now that you've asked me some questions, I want you to give your spin on the problem in a different way. Say, now that I've heard this, here's what I think the problem is. So what do you think the problem is now? If you have more than one problem that you think you've uncovered, go ahead and you can put it in your chat, you can say it, whatever.
How long have you been working with them?
Since October.
Did this process start out well, or
Oh, it started out great.
okay?
So what do you think the problem is? Or problems? What do you think, or what clarity do you now have on the problems that you didn't have before you started asking questions? Nobody?
Oh, I can always talk. This is Ellen.
Yeah.
I can. My perception through my filter is that they are they're scared of change, and that they have to make a decision on whether or not this is a business and they want to make a profit, or if they're trying to do stuff and entice the community to use their space.
Okay, good.
And if they use the community to entice their space, eventually some of those people might attend their church. But if they're more concerned about operating it as a business for a profit, I see it as that's where I see it's a dual problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I'm seeing this.
Okay, great. So this is how you perceive the problem now that we've asked questions and delved into it a little more. What are some other perceptions? Tandy says, I think clear communication is the issue and no practicality is being applied. Could you explain that, Tandy?
I got a feeling there's one person driving this whole thing and everybody else is going with the flow. That's what I perceive. And also, they're not looking at the practicality of what's happening and how they're going about it.
What do you mean by that?
I don't know, getting the community involved so they'll attend.
So what communications do you believe we need to clarify?
The results, the final results. What is our final result basis? It's got to be a clear, definite, result-based decision.
Do you think we need to communicate more on um, having people state their positions and maintain, what they feel about what we're doing as we're going along?
Yeah, more communication
More communication.
and more ideas. And then once they're all voiced and opinionated, then you can take a vote or decide which path is the right path to take. I think that happens a lot of times in groups, is that everybody voices their opinion, other people, and the results are decided by the few, not the many.
Mm.
And I think the many should all have their voice in.
So coercing those people who aren't forthcoming with their opinion and their feelings is critical to moving forward.
Yes.
Okay.
So everybody feels like they put in their own 2 cents and they know why the decisions that were made, rather than just somebody saying this is the way we're going to go.
Okay. Thank you. That's a very good insight. I like that. Luis says, I think the problem is the financial team, the community leadership are not on the same page. Come up with a budget and work together to accomplish the goal. I think the way I would restate that a little is that the financial team or that the community leadership, the lead, when you say, well, let me ask this. When you say community leadership, do you mean the church community or the Ocean City community?
The church.
Okay. One of the things that I've observed about this particular group is that they take their cue from the financial team a lot. So if the church leadership wants to make their decision, they ask the financial team to weigh in first. So if the financial team wants to close the community center, the church leadership is probably going to close the community center. They rejected all of our budget um, projections, and that's why I feel this way. Is that their sort of internal management style is really based on that financial team making a recommendation. And the financial team makes the recommendation based on purely financial matters. But yeah, I don't believe that the church community leadership is definitely on the same page. You're right, Yanira. No unity. They're all going off in different. Where is their faith? Ooh, that's a conversation that I've tried to have with them before. Where is their faith here? And
Maybe they don't.
there's a huge trust
Yeah,
issue,
yeah.
Wanda.
That's
That
what
is
I was
something we
thinking.
uncovered in the first meeting.
Yeah.
And I was hoping that this project and coming up with a way forward that everybody could support was going to go a long ways dealing with those trust issues. So you guys have come up with all sorts of problems, restatements that touch upon um, the fear of change. It touches upon the money issues, the lack of ability to compromise, uh, the ability to communicate, the leadership going in different directions, uh, the lack of trust. So there's all sorts of problems that are feeding into this. And you were able to identify that by asking the right questions. So are there any questions about what we just did, about the probing questions process here? Is this something that you think that you can put to use? One of the things I would like you to do, this isn't a homework assignment, but if you'll notice on the sheet, there are spaces for you to develop your own uh, probing questions for your unique situations. I encourage you to do that. Okay, great. Getting some good feedback here. So now let's move on to communicating with flexibility and authenticity. Um, to be authentic in your communications, you have to be honest, you have to set a very clear message, and you do not sugarcoat. Tomorrow, I am not going to be able to sugarcoat my message to this group. If I do, it'll be providing a misservice to them. Uh, so honesty, clarity, and don't sugarcoat. That's how you communicate with authenticity. Do you have any questions about what we just went through?
I really like the what we went through because a lot of it pertains to what we do. It's just a different group of people. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing, just the audience changes. So I really like that, and we'll consider um, writing things down like this first before implementing new things
Thank
to
you.
make sure.
Good. Joe says that it's interesting that honest is listed as number one. Why is that? Um, why do you find that significant?
Uh, I guess without going into a lot of details, in my past, I had some issues with honesty, and I listed that as one of my blind spots that I've been working on for some time. And so to me, that just hammers it home that honesty is such an important item.
Mm-hmm. Honesty and integrity are probably two of my main values. And um, when I, touching upon what I was telling you guys about this client, um, I have to confront the question of whether them not telling me certain things, keeping information from me, is being dishonest to me. Because there are some, I guess some people feel that that's not being dishonest. We're just not telling you because we don't want you to know or we don't think you need to know. Is different than lying. And I think based on the effect of that, it can be the same as lying. So I think that's probably one of the things I need to talk to them about tomorrow is, when you're talking about trust and honesty, how can, what you communicate and what you don't communicate contribute to building that trust or eliminating that trust? Alan says people find honesty uncomfortable in my experience. I have encountered that myself. Definitely, there are some people for which honesty, um, makes them, especially if you feel like that what you say is going to offend somebody or make them feel uncomfortable. Uh, all right. Now we're going to go into a practical application for your DISC and values in communication. So this can be found starting on page 33 of your manual. As it turns out, behaviors contribute towards communication barriers probably more than anything. Um, the way I approach communication is largely based on my behavioral set. And because of this, since people have different behaviors, um, uh, as you can see when you compare like DISC reports with someone, there are some natural behavioral barriers that occur based on the differences in your preferences. So first of all, if you're looking at somebody who has a high D, they tend to communicate with other high Ds really well and high Is as well. There tend to be very little communication barriers here. But it starts to go south when communicating with S's and C's. There are just some natural barriers that the different behaviors uh, experience because of their different behavioral styles and how that impacts communication. I's, again, good with the high D and the high I, starts to go south with the high S and the high C's. S's tend to communicate with the high D's and I's okay. They communicate with other high S's well, and they tend to communicate with high C's well as well. especially when it relates to topics of change, because S's and C's tend to be more comfortable with the incremental change. And then C's, not so well with D's and I's, much better with S's and other C's. So this is something I want you to understand moving forward as you're crafting communication strategies for people who you interact with all the time. So let's take a look at some examples here. These two people have these two behavioral profiles. So how well do you think they blend as far as their communication styles?
I think, well,
They blend very well, mostly because even though one has a higher S than the other and higher C than the other, they're
they're
both
close.
essentially the same behavioral set: high S, high C, moderate I, and low D. So these two people blend extremely well. They're very similar, and they should have, um, the pathways for good communications already built in. Okay. So managing their communication is not going to be as big a deal. What about these two people? Where are their issues going to be?
I think they should get along pretty good. Their
Yeah,
styles would
there
be
are some
decent.
areas there are
Yeah,
some areas where they are very close, like the low
right.
D's. And they both have a high C, although one's a lot higher than the other, they're still high C. Where is there some potential for some communication uh, inefficiencies?
Because they one wants um they want all the information up front. They want to know everything about it before they get involved.
Ellen says not so good. What is Ellen? What do you see is the main barrier here? Ellen?
I have to look at my books and refer to everything.
Okay.
Um, I can't find it. I was just going through the graph. I would think I was looking at the wrong picture, to be honest with you.
Okay. Look at the one with the smiley faces on it. Did you see a potential for there being a bad blend between these two people?
The difference is in their S's and I's could present potential issues.
Yeah. Yeah, they sort of are opposite there in their S's and I's. That could definitely do some potential issues there. What about these two people? Yes, Sheila says both have the same cautious. They're identical, aren't they? That's rare. 67-42 for both of them. So that's good. One's a high S, the other's a high I. One's a low I, but they also have a high D. So let's take it from just using that table there. Because they're both, one's a high D and one's a high I, is that an issue?
Oh,
Yeah, they tend to blend okay, just because D's and I's tend to have enough in common to communicate effectively. Okay. Um, so even though these two look a lot different, there are actually uh, some paths forward here. This person has a moderate S. This person has a high S. So what about the high S and the high I here? The high S and the high I are kind of a moderate.
yeah,
So there might be some issues there. They both have the high C, so that's fine.
potential.
So the real potential issue is here. And it's really not that drastic. Even though these two, there's some real differences here, there are opportunities for them to communicate effectively. So we've been looking at DISC results, and a lot of times you don't know what another person's DISC is. So you have to estimate. So let's look at a couple of techniques to estimate. Let's say that I want to figure out what a person's um, preferences are based on how I know them. So can somebody give me a person who they work with who you'd like to figure out what their behaviors are? You don't know their DISC, but you know them well enough to make some reasonable guesses here. Somebody give me somebody. Give me a somebody. Okay, Yanni, you don't, Sheila wants to know Yanni's. So, Yanni, this is good. Yanni can verify this. Okay. So, Sheila, do you think you know Yanni well enough to answer some of these questions here? First of all, does Yanni appear to you to be more extroverted or introverted? Okay. Sheila says introvert. Does Yanni appear to you to be more people oriented or task oriented? Task. Okay, so what you've just done through this process, introverted is the lower row and task is the rightmost column, and those two intersect at high C.
She's right too.
Ah,
Sorry, I'm sorry. Was I supposed to wait to say yes or no?
no,
She was
that's
right.
fine. That was perfect. Great timing.
Sorry.
Isn't that amazing how that works? Boom.
Yes.
You were just able to guess their highest based on what you know about them. So now you can craft a communication strategy. Let's say that I want to do a little better than just guessing their high behavior. Maybe I want to guess all four, right? So, Sheila, you say that she is slow to anger and very optimistic. So, slow to anger, that's a low D, and optimistic is a high I. Is she hard to read, or does she show whatever she's feeling? Hard to read. Okay, that's a high S. And then is she more by the book, respecting rules and processes, or is she more of a freewheeler who likes to break the rules? By the book. So what you've just guessed is low D, high I, high S, and high C. So Yanni, how close did she get here?
I think she's right on it.
She's right on it?
I yeah, because and I like the hard to read part because I am reserved.
Mhm.
And gotta do everything by the book, make sure everything's how do they say in English? Dot the I's and cross the T's. Something of that area.
So this now is a really effective tool for you to come up with a communication strategy for somebody whose disc results you don't have in front of you. Just go through this process, and it's in your, did I put the page number here? No. But it's in your manual. Use this process whenever you want to craft a communication strategy for an individual for whom you don't know their disc results. If you do have their disc results, and this is something that I highly recommend in an organization, I think everybody on a team should take this together and share one another's results. And if you do, you can get these pages that say communication insights for others. And you can uh, you can look very specifically at the things to do to effectively communicate with somebody and to avoid doing when you're communicating with someone. So imagine if you were on a team and you had a little booklet here that had a printout for each person. You knew exactly what to do to communicate with each person in your team. Um, and then over time, you learn these things about the people, and it helps you connect with one another and work more effectively as a team. So I highly recommend doing this within a team. So once you know this information, you can now start to um, implement strategies on very focused and custom tailored communications. So if I'm going to present information to a person and I know that they have a high D, this is what I know about them. They want me to be direct. They don't want me to dictate. They want me to approach them as an equal. They want me to move quickly, give alternatives, and ask for a decision. Make a recommendation and ask for a decision. Okay? If they challenge you, they're going to want to hear facts. So if you can disagree with them, but you better be able to back it up with facts. And ultimately, you want to seek a win-win situation. If I'm communicating with a high I want to be friendly, have some fun, maybe chit chat, allow them plenty of room to talk. because they're going to want to talk. Keep things moving. Focus on how what you're talking about impacts people. And again, seek a fast decision. So there's a very different approach from moving from the D to the I. And as we move now to the S, you want to be authentic, slow your pace down. Remember, high S's tend to like things at a slower pace. You need to build trust. Again, focus on the impact of people. Get to small yeses. If you're asking them to make a big change, you're probably not going to get there very easily unless you give them some incremental steps that get you there. So get to the small yeses. Listen to them very carefully. You might need to draw them out because remember, high S's tend to be more introverted. And then help them decide, sort of be a partner with them. And then high C's definitely want to see your information. They want to see what you bring to the table, what research you've done. So you need to be very thorough. Give them the data. Be patient. Be slower with them. Talk about the implications, of what you're recommending. Don't get too personal with them. High C's tend to be more impersonal, and don't close too fast. So this can be a real challenge when you're talking to an individual. And maybe you've got people in the room who are high D's and high I's, or maybe high D's and high S's, or high C's and high I's. So remember, keeping yourself aware of how to now present information, what your audience is going to be looking for from you to keep them engaged. Also keep in mind, sometimes it's not what you say that matters, it's why you say it. So we're now going to start looking at the implications of your values. Remember, the values reveal the why. So sometimes you really have to dig down into an individual's motivations to be able to connect with them. And this especially relates to when you're trying to persuade them to do something. So I'm going to, this again is in your manual, but I'm going to focus this on the idea of persuading or selling to each one of the 7 dimensions of values. So if you're going to be trying to persuade an aesthetic, you need to focus on presenting your information graphically, lots of visuals, with harmonizing elements, achieving balance. If a lot of high aesthetics are more environmentally conscious, so tout environmental benefits and tout how what you're trying to accomplish will bring order from chaos. If you're trying to persuade somebody with a high economic drive, you need to focus on those bottom line results. Are we increasing productivity, efficiency, effectiveness? Are we improving performance? What's our return on investment? What does this do to our margins and profitability? If I'm trying to persuade somebody with high individualistic, I want to focus on what are the advantages of being the first mover on this, of being the early adopter, adopting this new and different idea. You want to allow for differentiated propositions, how what you're doing improves governance and aligns with their priorities, providing greater freedom. If you're going to try to persuade somebody with high political, what's in it for them? How does what we're proposing enhance their position? I'm sorry? Is there a question? Okay. how does what you're suggesting enhance their position, extend their influence? How does this help grow our market position, differentiate our offering, increase accountability? If you're selling to somebody with a high altruistic drive, how does what you're proposing improve the level of service that you're offering? How does it support our beneficial networks, the networks we depend upon? What's the impact on people, on our people? How does this improve our staff experience? And how are we going to provide reassurance and help as we move along with this change? To persuade a regulatory, you need to focus on the tried and true. What I am suggesting is well proven. The methods, these are tried and true methods. We're systematizing our solutions. We're focusing on eliminating errors and enhancing our compliance. And again, making order from chaos. If I want to try to persuade somebody with high theoreticals are all about solving problems. So show how what we're doing, what's leading you to this, helped understand the problem and how I analyze the problem to get to this solution. The solutions need to be relevant. I need to offer evidence to support my and well-researched positions and rationale. And I also need to make sure that what I'm doing is clarifying and confirming along the way. This part of it can be very involving and time consuming. Digging down into the values, you definitely need to know your audience when it comes to this. So you're going to need to see people's values index in order to make use of this. Because a lot of times values are not on the surface and we don't understand what people's motivators are unless we know them very, very, very well. So do you have any questions about what we just covered? Everything that we just covered related to the DISC and values is now going to be part of your homework. So you're going to be using those tables and things in your manual in order to accomplish your homework. But before we move to that, are there any questions? Okay, here's your homework. I'm going to send you a DISC Plus report. Okay, this is a report from a client, it's a few years old. And I want you to compare your DISC Plus report with theirs and identify first how well you blend with them. And through that, uncover here are some of the barriers that I might encounter. And then look at their preferred, their communication insights for others on page 22. And look on page 36 of your manual and develop a strategy for connecting with them on the behavioral level. So what all do I need to include in my communications with them for our communications to be effective? And then I want you to go to 37 of your manual to help develop your value strategy. So how can I now, when I'm trying to persuade them? All right. And I'm going to email this to you here shortly. All right. And what I want you to do is I want you to develop this strategy. And I want you to put this in like a Word document or something and email it to me. And so that I can see your results. And I will have access to your DISC Plus so I can look at that. But this will definitely reveal, I hope, your ability to utilize the concept of blending and of developing and individual communication strategy. So, are there any questions about this? We're right at noon. Wow. Happy accident. Any questions about this? All right, we're going to reconvene on Friday morning at 9:30. If you have any questions, as you're going along, feel free to email me or call me, and we can address those. One last call for questions.
Are you emailing this, you said?
Yeah, I'm going to email you the Disc Plus report from the individual, and I will repeat these instructions.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you.
Sandy, I want to throw out a question or to a possible scenario. Since we discussed a little bit today on honesty, uh, if you're in like an office meeting and a person, says that they want to discuss a situation and they're looking for input from everybody and no comment is out of bounds or anything like that. There's not going to be any recriminations or whatever. And so people provide their suggestions, and one person provides a suggestion, and the boss reads him the riot act for suggesting that. Wouldn't that be considered dishonest?
Well, what do the rest of you think?
I would think that would be dishonest because you're telling them they can voice their opinion, say whatever they feel, and then you condemn condemn them for doing that. That's not being honest.
Does anyone else have any insight on that? Yeah, Tondi says my trust for that person would be gone.
Hmm? Yeah. I kind of see it
Don't
as
ask for the
entrapment
truth
too.
and then get upset.
Yeah.
So this is like one of those questions we were dealing with earlier. The person says there will be no reprisal, and you do it, and then there's reprisal. So your initial reaction to that, Joe, was
Bewilderment.
bewilderment.
Yeah, bewilderment, and also that feeling like I was trapped a little bit.
Did you
Uh,
discuss that? Did you say, I'm bewildered by this reaction because I did exactly what you said?
in that way, I don't know that I used the word bewildered, but one of the things I was pointing out was that personally, I felt I did nothing wrong because I was following the rules that they had laid out. And they wanted me the person wanted me to apologize for what I had said. And I said, I am not going to apologize because according to, again, what you had said, I didn't do anything wrong. I said, I will admit that I'm sorry that it hit a nerve, but that's different from apologizing for it because I followed your direction.
When you said what you said,
Yes.
did you believe that it could possibly evoke the reaction that you got?
No, not when I said it, because uh, I said something that obviously hit a blind spot with this person, and I had no idea they had that blind spot. So therefore, that was like the second thing that I felt compounded it is they were basically handing me my head or saying something that I had no knowledge would evoke that reaction.
Would there have been a way to say it differently that you think would have avoided evoking that reaction?
Or I mean, what was said in the meeting?
Yeah.
Uh, I am not, to this day, this happened several years ago.
Uh-huh.
Not at Swim, but in my previous work. Uh, I don't think so. I don't, I'm not so sure. I haven't thought of a way that I could have said it because I thought, and again, it's been so many years, I thought I said it relatively innocuously, excuse me.
Yeah, I think that my reaction to that would be, first, I agree. This would impact my level of trust with what they say. Um, if I would speak to them as their coach, I would tell them, be careful what you ask for because you might get it. And if you open the door, you're going to also open yourself up for hearing some things that you might not want to hear, and you need to consider how you're going to manage your emotional reaction to that.
Right, and obviously they, and,
But do I think it was dishonest? Let me put it to you this way. I don't think the person probably, and I don't know this person, so I can't say for sure, but having said that, you can say whatever you want, there'll be no reprisal. Sounds like a very open, inviting thing to say that they might have said without thinking about the consequences.
yeah,
And Sheila, I'm going to get to your question here in just a second. Um, the and I think that their reaction to that, having now realized that, oops, I'd better not ask this question unless I'm ready to get what to hear some things I don't want to hear. Their reaction to that, I don't know if it was dishonest, but it was disingenuous.
okay,
Uh, I
yeah,
think that I think that it should have been a teaching. They should have looked at that as a teaching moment for themselves to say, "Well, I really stepped into it here. Joe did exactly what I asked him to do, and this was the result. So I need to figure out how how to do this moving forward." But definitely, his reaction to you was disingenuous and inappropriate.
right.
I don't
And
know if I would say it was dishonest. To
yeah,
me, that's
I could see your point, Sandy. It's not that it was dishonest, but more, you're right, disingenuous. I think
uh,
personally, I don't think they thought what they were really asking for when they said everything out. They wanted, their intent was they wanted to try and figure a way to help the image of the office in dealing with other people.
mhm.
And not that it really matters, but what I said, a few of the people in the office, congratulated me. They felt I was right on in what I said. The the overarching thing with this is that uh, that person, if I remember right, and again, like I said, it was a lot of years ago, that person left not too long after this happened. They left the organization. I think they were already planning to leave, if I remember right. And one of the things that they wanted to do is they said, look, I'm leaving. And they wanted me to admit I was wrong, and I wouldn't do it. I just, but I was very nice about that. What I said was, I am truly sorry that this upset you. I said, but I am not going to admit I'm wrong because I said what I said based on what you laid out. And, so
Yeah,
in a
this
way,
this also sounds like an ego issue. You might have bruised this person's ego.
Uh, maybe it's possible. What I did was hit a nerve. Is that
Yeah.
I think from the ego issue, it was that uh, he wasn't well preserved by a lot of the other people, and he wasn't well perceived
Right.
by a lot of the other people in the organization. And I'm not saying that that was his problem, but when I said what I did, it just hit that nerve because it called up, you know, some of the issues he had, but again, when I said what I did, I was saying it, not thinking that I was going to cause a kerfuffle, if you will.
Live and learn.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to hold anybody any longer, but
Yeah, Sheila asked the question, should we try to figure out our boss's communication style so that we can frame our feedback to be more receptive? Yes, 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 emphatically yes. And there are two ways to do that. One is by using the estimation procedures that we went through. If you don't know their DISC and values. And another is just to ask them, hey, Sandy, let me take this cool assessment. I learned a lot about myself and I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. So would you be willing to take it? And then you give them the link and they take it. And that way you now can, see exactly how to craft a strategy to communicate more effectively with them. And if you communicate more effectively, what you're communicating will be better received. I don't know if it's going to result to more yeses, but it will definitely help you. It will help you more than hinder you if you can develop a more effective communication style that helps you blend better and eliminate some of those communication barriers. And then Wanda said that she felt her team had some communication issues and you had somebody come in and help with your communication style. So what exactly did you have them do there?
Well, she talked about communication and then she gave us an assessment. And so
Mhm.
when she gave us the assessment, and Louise and Ron can tell you, their thoughts on it, but I felt like we learned how all of us communicated our styles. And so it
Mhm.
made me more aware of Louise is different than Ron and how he receives information and how he does his job. And he's different than she is, how all of us are different. But
Mhm.
as long as you know the differences, then that helps. I'm not saying that's the
That's
end all. It's not an end all, but it really has helped us.
that is the critical thing in all, team related activities like this, is knowing that there are differences and what those differences are is really the critical thing. Because if you know what the differences are, you can now figure out ways to get around them. But it's that critical first step of knowing what those differences are and moving from thinking, oh, this person is a total jerk because they think differently than me, to this person thinks differently than me, and this is how they think differently than me. And now I value what they contribute to the team because they think differently than me. And now we can work on our relationship. Great. Any more questions before we disband? If any of you guys would like your boss to take this assessment, just send him the link. Or if you've got a coworker who you'd like to understand a little better, send them the link. Just let me know that you've done it. All right. And so with that, I'm going to send everybody home to have lunch. And I will send you the homework. Thank you guys. I will send you the homework and I will see you guys on Friday morning.